You can follow us everywhere in the universe. We're on Twitter at mmercado2333. Like the radio show on Facebook at Outreach Radio Chicago. And if you missed any past show, just go to YouTube, subscribe to me at Mike Mercado2333. We have all of our awesome past guests there ready for you to sit down and listen. And on today's show, we have a very special guest. He's the author of some awesome informational books for a lot of people out there who are struggling right now. One of the big concerns I get a lot when it comes to doing this show is a demographic that tends to get ignored a lot in this thing, and that's our, I don't want to say our elderly, but the people looking at retirement. And it's for a lot of people, especially my age, that word doesn't make any sense. Retirement, that's never going to come. But it's a big issue, and a lot of Americans are suffering and are not able to retire and live comfortably as they get older in life. He is the author of The Secret World of Money. Uncle Sam cooks the books, and he has the newsletter World of Money. He is Andrew Goss, and if you want more information, just call 1-800-468-2646 or go to his website at andygauze.com. And joining us at Outreach Radio Chicago to give us some information about how we can help with those retiring is Andy Gauze. Andy, welcome to Outreach Radio. How are you, bud?
I'm doing great, Mike. How about yourself?
I can't complain. Finally, the weather has changed over here in Chicago. We're nice weather. Winter looks like it's far ahead. But for a lot of people, the storms just keep coming with the retirement stuff. I'm 26 years old, just to give a basis of my age group. And the word retirement really just doesn't register a lot to people my age, a little bit younger. But it's a situation that seems to be getting out of the reach for a lot of people nowadays.
Well, it has, and you know, for the most part, I hate to blame it on Social Security, but it's like, you know, don't feed the bears. The folks have tended, you know, where this was intended to be a backup plan, it's become the frontal plan of retirement for too many Americans. And quite honestly, there's just not enough money in the Social Security Trust Fund for everyone to use it like a retirement plan, but that's what it's turned into for a great many Americans. Social Security is their one and only source of revenue in their elder years.
With Social Security, because that's a word that, that's a perfect time for somebody my age. The thought of there's not going to be Social Security when I'm ready to retire. That 40 years from now, there's a lot of fear for a lot of people that just won't be a reality. How did we get to that point, though, in where we were so dependent on these checks? Where did the money go from 40 years of working?
Well, that's the question. See, this is the one that no one wants to answer. And the truth of the matter is, if you look at the Social Security Trust Fund's balance sheet, you'll find that it has like $3 trillion. I don't want to say it this way, but before you were born, in 1986, for us working Americans that are in our baby boomers, let's call them, they told us that by the time 2010 comes, Social Security will be insolvent, and so we need to hike payroll taxes, and we need to do it now. And so the Greenspan Commission in 1986 gave us what was conceivably, or was, in fact, the largest tax increase in history. And that was under George Bush Sr.'s watch. And it cost him his re-election. I don't know if you remember. It was read my lips, no new taxes. And sure enough, as soon as he got in, they hiked the payroll tax by a record amount.
Unbelievable.
And right. So they piled up all this cash. Now, by the time Bill Clinton took office, if you recall, he was reporting to the American public that we had a surplus, and that, you know, the deficit was zero, that we had, in fact, made up for all the deficit spending, and that now we needed to figure out how to spend the surplus. Well, that was a mistake, because the surplus included all of the Social Security contributions, and so the government literally borrowed nearly $3 trillion from the Social Security Trust Fund and spent it on other things. And now they don't want to pay it back. And that's kind of the crux of the issue. Between the paying back Social Security and the interest on the national debt, you're eating up 70% of every tax dollar. And next year it goes up to 74% of every tax dollar. So for your generation, that leaves about 26 cents to do everything else. Let's start with defense. Well, there goes the 26 cents. Now, nothing else beyond that can be funded through your taxes. What does it mean? Well, it means higher taxes. That's the number one thing you should count on. And the second component is, when I was a kid, we had a gold-backed dollar, and our coins were made of silver. And so our attitude was, save your money, pay off your debts early and live debt-free. Why? Well, because if you saved your money next year, it was going to be worth more. And the year after, it would be worth more. And so just saving it was all you had to do. In fact, in 1965, when I started saving money, a silver quarter from 1964 would buy me a gallon of gas. A silver quarter today will buy 2 gallons of gas, even though gas is, $2 plus a gallon. So it is the substance of the money, the quality of the money that has really changed over the last 20 or 30 years. In fact, since Nixon closed the gold window in 1971, we've gone away from a money-backed currency, and our currency is now backed by debt. In fact, so much so that it's frightening to look. I see you're in Chicago, right? You guys have a tax hike that was rolled out on Thursday that's going to absolutely crush the town, right? What is it? Something like $700 million tax hike?
A crazy made-up number.
Yeah. Oh, and that's because your pension fund for its city workers only has 32 cents on the dollar. So for every dollar they need to pay their fire and police pensions, they only have 32 cents. And this shortfall occurs not just in individuals' portfolios. So if you think about it like what we're talking about, Americans, 60% of them don't even have $1,000 put aside for retirement. So just like the individual citizen, America's cities have also failed to put aside enough money to pay for their recipients to retire. And in the case of Chicago, the entire pension fund will be empty in 10 years. So you have to do it, individuals have to do it, and cities, states, and federal government has to do it. But no one has been willing thus far to step up and take the medicine that is required. And we keep putting it off and putting it off, like we did the crash in 2007. We create a bunch more money and put it into circulation thinking that's going to fix the problem. It's only going to give us money that's worth less. So we have two things boiling. The bond market is, of course, bubbling from the lowest interest rates in 40 years. As interest rates start to rise, people will start dumping bonds. As they start dumping bonds, the Federal Reserve will create more money, and it's like a vicious cycle. So even if you save $1, by the time you go to spend it, it's only worth 20 cents. So it's a tough place to be, and we need to dust off the Constitution and go back to what money used to be. If you saved a silver dollar and you went back to it today, it's worth 27 times its face value. So that will certainly pace inflation and provide for retirement. We need to look more at our money and less at how we're saving it or investing it.
Okay, I have two things that I want to get into because that word inflation is just that's the buzzword, that's the key word. So the two things I'm interested in is how long of a process is it for the value of $1, for example, to just keep losing its value? How long does it take? Is it a decade? Is it 6 weeks? Is it literally the decision written on Capitol Hill by people who are elected on a pen, and all of a sudden the values change? And exactly how has inflation affected the economy more recently than, let's say, during the Great Depression and so on and so forth, especially that big drop off we had in 2007?
Okay, so the inflation that is currently in the system is pent up. And who would understand this is a plumber. So it's sitting in a tank above our heads. And we don't see it now because it's represented by money that doesn't exist. For example, all of you public employees in Chicago believe your pension is sitting in a pension fund when, in fact, it's only 32 cents on the dollar. All of the people with Social Security are expecting Social Security, but that money is represented by debt of the federal government. So it hides. If there were $3 trillion in the Social Security Trust Fund the way they're supposed to be, well, inflation would be a heck of a lot higher. If all of the money was where it was supposed to be, inflation would be a lot higher, but it's not. It's represented by a debt instrument, and until it's cashed, you don't feel the inflation. So what's happening is a reversal. Inflation has been hidden because people have been putting money away for retirement, but now starting in 2012, when they start to retire, they actually want the money, and then they want to go spend it. Now, what is the injection point? Well, if you look at how we did the TARP bailout, we gave all those billions and billions of dollars to the banks. They were the injection point. What did they do with that money? Well, if you look at the Fed's balance sheet, you'll see that the banks just deposited the money with the Federal Reserve and said, here, hold on to this for us. They didn't loan it. They didn't spend it. They just deposited it with the Fed. They have nearly $3 trillion on deposit at the Federal Reserve. So that money is not competing for goods and services in circulation. When it does, the inflation rate will be much higher than the one that they report. That's, of course, another tale. They report inflation by looking in the rearview mirror. How long does it take? Well, when you give money to the banks and they don't spend it, it could take forever. Until they spend it, you won't see the inflation caused by that. The more profitable plan would have been for the federal government to simply mail $5,000 to every taxpayer who filed a return in 2007.
Really?
And so then you inject the money directly into the economy, and that would have been very inflationary, which is probably why they didn't do it. What we're seeing now, for the first time in 8 years, monetary velocity is starting to increase. So people are actually spending money again. For the last 7 years, they've kind of held back, kept their powder dry. Mm-hmm. If you look at new housing sales today, they're up a record amount, something like 9% over last year. So it is that spending of the pent-up demand that brings on the inflation. And you really can't say it's going to be a year or 6 months or 6 weeks. The tank is full, that's for sure. If you look at the H1 balance sheet, the potential for inflation is there. You only need three components to have it. One is that increase in the money supply. We have that. The Fed added $4 trillion in 7 years. The second is slack, resource slack. If unemployment is high and factories are not being used, they don't raise prices. And now we're finally starting to use up that slack. And the third, of course, monetary velocity. If I give you $1, do you spend it or do you just sock it in a vault somewhere? That is what's been going on for the last 7 years. People have piled up the cash. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable. Money in the bank. When the crisis started, we had $6 trillion collectively in the bank. Now we have $13 trillion in the bank. So we've piled up the money, and we're just waiting for an excuse to spend it. And when we do, that's when the inflation will hit the economy.
Andy Gause joins us today on Outreach Radio Chicago. You can see all his awesome work if you go to the website andygause.com. That's ANDYGAUSE.com. You can find things like The Secret World of Money, Uncle Sam Cooks the Books, and his newsletter, World of Money. Dial 1-800-468-2646. Now, when I was doing research for all this, Andy, one of the things that was interesting. It was even a bullet point when it came down the wire was trying to find the actual rate and the numbers of the inflation over the last, let's say 10 years, whatever the case may be. It's hard to find. Why is it? And I guess it's one thing when you're dealing with money and government, but why is it so hard for the common man, for myself, to find this information about money? Why was it that it took me having to have an expert on a radio show to know that it went from 6 trillion to 13 trillion? Like, where's the disconnect between the government and its citizens?
They don't want you to know. Inflation used to be a simple definition. It is a simple definition. In fact, if you look at my book, Secret World of Money, I define it. Inflation is an increase in the broad money supply. So we all know about supply and demand. Mm-hmm. So if there's $1 million chasing around goods and services, then prices are kind of what they are. If all of a sudden someone creates another $1 million and puts it in circulation, well, that's double the amount of money. And you would expect that the price of everything would double. Mm-hmm. But they've changed the definition of inflation. Now they measure inflation by how much things cost. So instead of measuring by saying, hey, we've doubled the supply of money or we've tripled the supply of money, they measure it by saying, well, the price of a hamburger went up. So we figure you're going to switch from hamburger to pork chops. And in doing this, they adjust. Now, I say, in my second book, I had enough. I wrote the first one in the 90s. I wrote the second one in 2003. I titled it Uncle Sam Cooks the Books. Mm-hmm. And it is unquestionable to me that they monkey with the inflation rate as reported by the Consumer Price Index. That's what they tell us. So they report to us the Consumer Price Index. Oh, the price of TVs went down because we moved all of our TV factories to China. Okay, nobody has a job, but at least TVs are cheaper. That is the sort of reporting we get out of our federal government. If you really want to know the true inflation rate, all you have to do is go to the Federal Reserve's balance sheet and calculate the increase in their balance sheet in any given year. So if we become 3% more productive and you increase the money supply by 3%, they net each other out. You have no inflation. That's what the central bank is intended to do. But if you're only growing by 3% a year and all of that is government work, then you're really not increasing productivity. Now you double the money supply, and then you double it again. Boy, that's inflation. And if they just reported us that, hey, we had to double the money supply to stop from going into a depression during the crisis, well, everyone would understand that that means future inflation. But they just keep it from us. In fact, that bugaboo of no inflation, there's no inflation, that's absurd. It's like that Shakespeare thing, methinks thou doth protest too much, because I know when I go shopping, everything costs more than it did last year.
And it's unbelievable, and it makes me think, the first thing that comes to my mind, especially with something like this, is why is it that when I turn on the news, whether it's CNBC, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, whatever the case may be, you're always hearing about these nations that we put on a pedestal, that they got all their stuff in order and they know exactly what they're doing, and then you have a country like Greece go through what they went through with their economy, and yet a country like the United States isn't taking lessons from it. Is it going to take something like a catastrophic, I don't know how many more we can do than what happens in the 30s and 2007, but I mean, what are we learning from these other countries, from these other economies?
Oh, yes, we are. We've learned, for example, that as long as there's nothing constraining the Federal Reserve, then they can create as much money as they want. You know, the Constitution was intended to constrain government from creating money at will when it said in Article 1, no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debt. But once you've gone away from that, then we have no standard dollar. So unfortunately, the things that they're learning are not good for us. You know, their learning caused them to say, okay, we've got a bunch of mortgage-backed securities out there that are no good, and we're going to monetize them. So how many of them are there? 2 trillion? Great. We're going to create $2 trillion, and we're going to exchange it for these worthless mortgage-backed securities, and then that's going to back our money. That is an absurd way to do it, although from the perspective of the central bank, it works great. From the perspective of the person trying to save their money, it's a horror show. So, you know, they're paying meager interest, because why would they pay anything at all for your money when they could simply create it for free? And that's what they've been doing.
That's unbelievable. Andy Gauze joins us today on Outreach Radio Chicago, giving us some helpful tips about money saving, and on top of it, the idea that the plan that a lot of people don't do, even as they go on in their career and they're buying houses and having families, and that's retirement. And one thing that I've gathered from the show, and I think a lot of my listeners are going to be very interested in, is what can they do to protect themselves from this crazy spending that's going on, and these and basically these lies that they're being told up front.
Well, you know what the old saying that never ask a barber if you need a haircut. I'm a gold and silver coin dealer, and the reason I am is because I realize that the only protection against inflation is to buy the things that the Constitution describes as money. So I trade my paper and electronic money for old silver dollars, old 50-cent pieces, and things of that nature. So when I started doing that, a silver dollar was $1.25, and now it's $27. So regardless of what happens underneath, my silver dollar will continually appreciate and offset inflation. Now, you're not going to double your money overnight like you would in some risky stock, but if you're looking for a way to save money privately, no one knows you have it, and in such a way that you protect yourself against inflation, that's the way to go. And I'll tell you what, Mike, I have 3 audio CDs that will explain this in an hour and a half. The first one is entitled The Federal Reserve, explains how the Fed works. The second one is The Definition of Money, tells you what a dollar is. And the third, Protecting Your Wealth. That's the one that tells you how to buy the gold and silver coins, no matter where you get them from. And if you want these 3 CDs and the companion booklets absolutely free of charge, all you have to do is call our 800 number, 800-468-2646. Mention Outreach Radio or Mike Mercado, and we'll send them to you free of charge. I'm sending Mike the bill. Don't worry about it. It's on him. 800-468-2646. 2646.
And go to the website, AndyGauss.com. That's Andy, GAUSE.com. Don't forget The Secret World of Money, Uncle Sam Cooks the Books, World of Money newsletter, the 3 CDs that are on me here on Outreach Radio Chicago now, and some other really cool stuff. Andy, I know you're super busy, all the stuff that's going on right now. Is there any last words you want to give anybody listening to right now on YouTube, in the Chicagoland area, over in, Santa Cruz, wherever the case may be, anybody who has this kind of going on in their head, that, on their shoulders trying to carry this? Do you have any last words, any last minute advice for anybody?
No, more like prayers, I got to say, especially Chicago, and Illinois in general. The tax man has their eyes on you, and if they can see your wealth, they will seize it. So you better put it in a place where it can't be seen by some bureaucrat without putting down his donut, because he'll come and take it from you. That is unfortunately the lesson to take away from this. So give me a call, 800-468-2646. Mention Outreach Radio or Mike Mercado, and we'll send you these CDs and the information that goes with them absolutely free.
Thank you so much, Andy, for the time. Again, the website's AndyGauss.com, The Secret World of Money, Uncle Sam Cooks the Books, the World of Money newsletter. Call 1-800-468-2646. Andy is giving you guys all the resources you need to make sure you get ahead of this and that you guys do the proper research and you have all the information you need. Andy, thank you so much. Anytime you have anything new you want to talk about, you want to help out any of the people, you have a home here on Outreach Radio Chicago.
Thank you, my brother. I know that's true. You take care of yourself, Mike.
You too, my man, and we'll be right back here on Outreach Radio Chicago. And that'll do it for us here on Outreach Radio Chicago. One last thank you to Andy Gauss for joining us today. Hopefully you guys got some good information. In case you were wondering about retirement, if you've had any worries or any issues with it, please check out all the cool resources that they have. Go to www.andygauss.com. That's ANDYGAUSE.com. Dial 1-800-468-2646. He told you guys earlier in the show they will send you some free audio tapes, 3 CDs, some awesome stuff if you're looking for more resources and information. And of course, he has his books, The Secret World of Money, Uncle Sam Cooks the Books, and his World of Money newsletter. Andy Gauss, please check it out. A big thank you to him for all the awesome information and time. And a big thank you to all of you for joining us today on this episode of Outreach Radio Chicago. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Mercado2333. Like the radio show on Facebook at Outreach Radio Chicago. You subscribe to us on YouTube /Mike Mercado 2333, and you can see past episodes, reviews, and other cool commentary we have on the YouTube page. Thank you everybody for joining us on this episode. Please take care of yourselves, and we will see you next time on Outreach Radio Chicago. Take us home, Hav. Hey everybody, Mike Mercado here from Outreach Radio Chicago, and I just want to thank you all for all the support you have given us on the brand new show. If someone you know wants to get the word out on a fundraiser, charity, or foundation in your local community, please send us an email at outreachradiochicago@gmail.com or send me one personally at mmercado@newswebradio.net. Or you can tweet me at mmercado2333, and don't forget to like our Facebook page at Outreach Radio Chicago. From right here at the studios, we'll see you next time on Outreach Radio Chicago.